I need everyone watching this video right now to understand that what happened backstage on Smackdown last night might be the most vicious, calculated, and downright disturbing attack I have witnessed in WWE programming this entire year, and the fact that it was Cody Rhodes participating in it makes it even more shocking and controversial than you could possibly imagine. Jacob Fatu and Cody Rhodes, two men who theoretically should have nothing in common and no reason to be working together, brutally attacked Drew McIntyre in a backstage segment that was so violent, so prolonged, and so one-sided that I'm still trying to process whether what I watched was appropriate for a wrestling show or whether WWE crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. The image of the undisputed WWE champion participating in what can only be described as a mugging, a two-on-one beatdown of someone who had no chance to defend himself properly, is going to haunt me and should haunt everyone who witnessed it. I'm going to break down exactly what happened, why it happened, what it means, and why so many people are absolutely furious about how this was presented and executed. Let me start by setting the context because what led to this attack is almost as important as the attack itself. Drew McIntyre has been on an absolute warpath for weeks, targeting Cody Rhodes specifically with increasingly personal and vicious verbal attacks. Drew has made it clear that he believes Cody doesn't deserve to be champion, that Cody has been handed opportunities that Drew had to fight for, and that Drew is going to do whatever it takes to not just win the championship but to destroy Cody Rhodes in the process. The tension between them has been building to a point where everyone knew some kind of physical confrontation was inevitable. What nobody expected was that the confrontation would happen the way it did, with Cody essentially ambushing Drew with help from one of the most dangerous men on the entire WWE roster. Jacob Fatu has been positioned since his arrival as an absolute monster, someone who operates outside normal boundaries and who seems to take genuine pleasure in inflicting pain on people. He's aligned with the bloodline in various capacities, but he's also shown that he's willing to attack anyone regardless of affiliation if he feels like it or if someone makes it worth his while. Jacob is legitimately one of the most physically imposing and intimidating performers in WWE right now, and the idea of him targeting you is terrifying for anyone on the roster. So when rumors started circulating earlier in the day that Jacob Fatu was in the building for SmackDown despite not being advertised, people should have known something significant was going to happen. The segment itself started innocuously enough. Drew McIntyre was backstage in the locker room area, and it appeared he was getting ready for a match or a segment later in the show. He was alone, which in hindsight was probably a mistake given how many enemies he's made recently, but Drew has never been the type to worry about his safety or to travel with an entourage. The camera was positioned in a way that showed Drew from the side, and you could see him taping his wrists and preparing himself mentally for whatever was coming later in the night. There was no indication that anything was about to go wrong, no ominous music or dramatic camera angles suggesting danger was approaching. Then Jacob Fatu appeared in the frame behind Drew, and the entire energy of the segment changed immediately. Jacob wasn't running or charging, he was just walking toward Drew with this purposeful stride and this look on his face that made it clear he was there to do damage. Drew must have sensed something or heard footsteps because he started to turn around, but by the time he fully turned to see what was behind him, Jacob was already on top of him. The first strike Jacob threw was a massive forearm to the side of Drew's head that stunned him and sent him stumbling backward into a locker. Before Drew could even begin to defend himself or fight back, Cody Rhodes appeared from the other direction, cutting off any escape route Drew might have had. And the look on Cody's face was what made this so shocking and disturbing. This wasn't reluctant or conflicted Cody who had been forced into a situation he didn't want to be in. This was cold, calculated Cody who had clearly planned this attack and was fully committed to carrying it out. Cody didn't say anything, didn't offer any explanation or justification, he just started throwing punches at Drew while Jacob held him against the lockers and prevented him from defending himself properly. The brutality of what followed was genuinely difficult to watch. Jacob and Cody took turns hitting Drew with strikes that looked incredibly stiff and painful. They threw him into walls, into more lockers, onto the concrete floor. At one point Jacob hit Drew with what looked like a Samoan drop onto a steel equipment case, and the sound of Drew's body hitting that metal was sickening. Drew tried multiple times to fight back, to create some space, to defend himself, but every time he started to get any momentum going, one of his attackers would hit him from behind or from an angle he couldn't see. This wasn't a fight, it was an execution. What made this attack particularly disturbing was how long it went on. This wasn't a quick beatdown that lasted 30 seconds before security arrived. This went on for what felt like several minutes with Jacob and Cody methodically destroying every part of Drew's body. They were targeting his legs to take away his mobility, his ribs to make it hard for him to breathe, his head with strikes that looked like they could cause legitimate concussions. And through it all, neither Jacob nor Cody showed any hesitation or remorse. They looked like they were enjoying it, like this was exactly what they wanted to be doing. Drew McIntyre is one of the toughest men in WWE, someone who's proven time and time again that he can take punishment and keep fighting. But even Drew has his limits, and watching him try desperately to protect himself while being overwhelmed by two attackers was genuinely hard to watch. At one point Drew was on his hands and knees trying to crawl away, and Jacob just casually walked over and kicked him in the ribs hard enough that Drew collapsed completely. That image of Drew helpless and trying to escape while his attackers pursued him was brutal and uncomfortable in a way that wrestling doesn't usually make me feel. The really shocking moment came when Cody Rhodes pulled out a steel chair. Up until that point, this had been a brutal beatdown, but it had been done with fists and throws and slams. But when Cody grabbed that chair, it signaled that they were about to escalate to a different level of violence. Drew saw the chair and you could see in his eyes that he knew what was coming and was trying to get away, but Jacob grabbed him and held him in place. Cody didn't hesitate. He swung that chair with full force directly into Drew's back, and the sound of steel hitting flesh echoed through the backstage area. Then he hit him again. And again. Multiple chair shots to Drew's back while Jacob held him in position, turning this from an attack into something that looked almost like torture. Security finally showed up after what felt like an eternity, and they started trying to pull Jacob and Cody away from Drew. But both men got in a few more shots even as they were being restrained, as if they wanted to make absolutely certain that the message they were sending was received loud and clear. Drew was left lying on the floor barely moving, surrounded by the wreckage of broken equipment and that steel chair that had been used as a weapon. Medical personnel rushed in to check on Drew while Jacob and Cody were escorted away, and neither of them looked back or showed any concern for what they'd just done to another human being. The immediate questions that arise from this attack are numerous and troubling. First and foremost, why did Cody Rhodes, who has positioned himself as an honorable fighting champion who respects the business and does things the right way, participate in a 2-on-1 ambush attack? This goes against everything Cody has claimed to stand for throughout his championship reign. Cody has talked repeatedly about winning the right way, about being a champion who anyone can be proud of, about honoring the legacy of the championship and the business. But orchestrating a backstage ambush with a partner who's known for being one of the most vicious attackers in WWE? That's not honorable. That's cowardly and hypocritical. The involvement of Jacob Fatu raises its own questions because we weren't given any explanation for why he was involved in this. What's Jacob's motivation for helping Cody attack Drew? Are they aligned now in some kind of partnership or alliance? Did Cody offer Jacob something in exchange for his help? Or does Jacob have his own reasons for wanting to hurt Drew Mcintire that we're not aware of yet? The lack of explanation makes this feel random and confusing, like WWE just wanted a shocking moment without thinking through the logistics of why it would happen or what it means for anyone's character. Let's talk about Drew Mcintire as the victim in this situation because that's a significant role reversal from how he's been presented recently. Drew has been the aggressor, the one making threats, the one promising violence against Cody Rhodes. So in some twisted way, you could argue that Drew brought this on himself through his actions and his words. But there's a massive difference between promising to hurt someone in a sanctioned match environment and actually orchestrating a backstage ambush with numerical advantage. What Cody and Jacob did to Drew crosses lines that even heel behavior typically doesn't cross in modern WWE. This was criminal assault disguised as a wrestling angle. The way this attack was shot and presented by the production team made it feel even more disturbing and real than typical wrestling violence. The camera work was tight and intimate, showing the pain on Drew's face, capturing every brutal impact, lingering on moments where Drew was clearly suffering. The audio was mixed to emphasize the sounds of violence, the grunts of pain, the impacts of bodies and weapons hitting flesh and bone. Everything about how this was presented screamed that we were supposed to be uncomfortable watching this, that this wasn't meant to be entertaining in a traditional sense but rather shocking and disturbing. And it absolutely achieved that goal. Cody Rhodes' character has now been fundamentally altered by his participation in this attack, and there's no way to walk that back or pretend it didn't happen. Every time Cody talks about being an honorable champion going forward, people are going to remember that he orchestrated a 2-on-1 attack on Drew Mcintire. Every time he criticizes someone else for taking shortcuts or being dishonorable, he's going to be called a hypocrite. This single decision to participate in this attack has tainted everything about Cody's championship reign and his positioning as a babyface hero. You simply cannot be the good guy while doing things like this. The justification for this attack better be incredibly compelling when it's eventually revealed, because right now it looks indefensible. If WWE's explanation is simply that Drew pushed Cody too far with his words and Cody snapped and decided to take revenge by any means necessary, that's not good enough. That doesn't excuse orchestrating a 2-on-1 ambush. That doesn't make Cody look strong or justified. It makes him look weak for needing help to deal with Drew and morally compromised for attacking someone who wasn't prepared to defend himself. There needs to be more to this story than simple revenge, otherwise Cody comes out of this looking terrible from a character perspective. Jacob Fatu's role as the muscle in this attack makes sense given his character, but it also creates potential issues going forward. If Jacob is now aligned with Cody, does that mean he's going to be Cody's enforcer moving forward? Is Cody going to rely on Jacob to handle his dirty work and protect him from threats? Because if so, that completely undermines Cody as a fighting champion who can handle his own business. One of Cody's strengths as champion has been that he doesn't need help or protection, he wins his matches and defends his title based on his own ability. But if he's now hiding behind Jacob Fatu, that strength becomes a weakness and his character becomes far less appealing. The physical toll this attack is supposed to have on Drew McIntyre is going to be interesting to see play out. Based on how brutal and prolonged that beating was, Drew should legitimately be out of action 4 weeks if not months. He took chair shots to the back, he was thrown into and through solid objects, he took finishers and high-impact moves on concrete and steel. There's no way someone realistically recovers from that kind of assault quickly. So either WWE is going to commit to having Drew off television for a significant period to sell the severity of the attack, or Drew is going to show up next week looking relatively fine, which would completely undercut the impact of what we watched happen to him. Let me address what I'm sure some people are thinking, which is that this attack makes perfect storytelling sense as a way to escalate the feud between Cody and Drew to its ultimate conclusion. Violence begets violence. Drew has been threatening Cody for weeks, so Cody struck first in a decisive and brutal way. From a pure narrative escalation standpoint, that logic tracks. The problem is that it fundamentally breaks Cody's character to have him participate in this kind of attack. If this was Kevin Owens or Seth Rollins or another character who has established that they are willing to bend or break moral rules to achieve their goals, this would be fine. But Cody has spent his entire championship reign establishing that he's different, that he's better than people who take these kinds of shortcuts. Having him do this destroys that carefully built characterization. The crowd reaction to this segment when it aired was fascinating because you could hear people being genuinely shocked and not necessarily in a good way. There were gasps and sounds of discomfort rather than cheers or enthusiastic reactions. Some people were booing, but it wasn't clear if they were booing because they were supposed to boo the heels or if they were booing the booking decision itself. The confusion and discomfort in the crowd reaction mirrors the confusion and discomfort I felt watching this segment, and I think a lot of fans are going to have similar responses. This wasn't fun or entertaining, it was dark and disturbing, and not everyone is going to appreciate that tone. The online reaction has been predictably explosive with people arguing passionately on both sides. Some people think this is brilliant storytelling that shows Cody has a darker edge than we knew, that he's willing to do whatever it takes to protect his championship even if it means compromising his principles. Other people think this completely destroys Cody's character and makes him no better than the villains he's been fighting against. There's very little middle ground in these discussions. People either love this direction or hate it. And honestly, I find myself somewhere in the conflicted middle, understanding the storytelling rationale while being bothered by the execution and implications. What happens next is going to be crucial in determining whether this was a brilliant swerve that takes Cody's character in an interesting new direction or whether it was a mistake that WWE will need to spend months trying to correct. If Drew comes back seeking revenge and we get an incredible payoff match where he finally gets his hands on both Cody and Jacob and makes them pay for what they did, that could redeem this angle. If Cody has to grapple with what he's done and face consequences for crossing ethical lines, that could create compelling internal conflict for his character. But if this is just forgotten about in a few weeks or brushed aside as no big deal, then it was a waste of a shocking moment and it damaged Cody's character for no good reason. Jacob Fatu aligning with Cody Rhodes even temporarily is strange from a roster dynamics perspective because Jacob has been associated with the bloodline and with that Samoan dynasty storyline. Having him suddenly working with Cody, who has been one of the primary opponents of the bloodline over the past year, doesn't make immediate sense unless there's a larger plan at play that we're not seeing yet. Maybe this is setting up a betrayal where Jacob is actually working against Cody on behalf of someone else. Maybe this is the beginning of a new faction or alliance that will become clearer in the coming weeks. Or maybe WWE just wanted Jacob involved in a major angle and didn't worry too much about the logic of how he got there. The brutality of this attack also raises questions about what's acceptable in WWE programming and where the line is between hard-hitting wrestling content and content that's too violent or disturbing. WWE has been trying to maintain a certain level of family-friendliness while also appealing to fans who want more intense and realistic content. This attack was definitely on the more intense and disturbing end of the spectrum, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are discussions internally about whether it went too far. The chair shots especially, hitting someone who's being held and can't defend themselves, that's imagery that's uncomfortable even for people who are used to wrestling violence. Drew McIntyre's eventual response to this attack is going to define him as a character going forward. He could come back broken and scared, afraid to face both Cody and Jacob at once. But that seems unlikely given everything we know about Drew's character. More likely is that Drew comes back even more motivated and more dangerous, viewing this attack as proof that Cody fears him and can't beat him in a fair fight. Drew could use this as fuel to become even more aggressive and determined in his pursuit of the championship. The fire in Drew's eyes when he eventually returns is going to be incredible to see, assuming WWE follows through on making this attack have lasting consequences and meaning. So here we are trying to make sense of what we witnessed last night on SmackDown. Fatu and Cody Rhodes, two men who theoretically had no reason to be working together, brutally attacked Drew McIntyre in a prolonged backstage assault that was genuinely disturbing to watch. Cody's involvement completely contradicts his established character as an honorable fighting champion. The lack of clear explanation for why this happened makes it feel confusing and random. The extreme violence raises questions about what's appropriate for WWE programming. And the aftermath of this attack is going to reverberate through SmackDown for weeks or months to come, affecting everyone involved. I need every single person watching this video to tell me in the comments right now what you thought of this attack. Was this brilliant storytelling or character assassination for Cody Rhodes? Does Fatu's involvement make sense to you? And most importantly, how do you think Drew McIntyre should respond when he returns? This is the kind of controversial wrestling content that demands discussion and debate. Make sure you smash that like button, make sure you subscribe to this channel, and make sure you share this video because everyone in the wrestling community needs to be talking about what happened on SmackDown last night and whether WWE made the right call with this shocking and disturbing angle.